Liberals of Reddit, what is your most conservative view? Conservatives of Reddit, what is your most liberal view? Conservative. Most recreational drugs should be legal and regulated and taxed. Then people could be safer, the state would have less people serving time, gain tax dollars, and not lose them on holding people who had acid on them. Traditionally the right has been more in favor of the war on drugs. I think recent polls show the right has softened on that issue though, especially with younger people like me. Dem. I'm not opposed to the death penalty. I'm a registered Republican, have the paperwork to switch to independent ready, just haven't mailed it, who leaned center-right. I was pro-death penalty but now I'm against it. I don't like the state having the right to execute a citizen. There has been too many cases of executing innocent people, and one is too many for me, and the appeals process makes it more expensive than life in prison. I was very staunchly pro-death penalty until I had to write a paper defending it. I'm now staunchly anti-death penalty. Personally, I think the death penalty should be restricted to people who murder while in jail. You know, the people who are too dangerous to keep around. I feel like that could potentially increase the prison murder rate. Not sure where you're getting your information, but from what I've been able to find it's not many. 166 exonerations total for the entire US over 40 years, and most of those are pre-execution, not post. I'm against the death penalty unless you can prove that these people are 100% guilty of the crime, and that is 100% of the time. Also, I believe if we are going to continue executing people we should use something 100% effective, the guillotine. Conservative here. I don't care about pride parades and support 99.9% of the LGBTQ+ in general. It's more of an old school conservative viewpoint to hate gay people, but still. Personally I don't care what you stick where or with who as long as there's consent all around. LGBTQ are all good in my book, but the plus just feels like moving goalposts where no one can agree on anything, and ignore that most of them do fit into LGBT or Q. Yeah, I guess. I just don't care enough to defend that point. I was talking about more I legit don't care who you are attracted to or whatever as long as you're a good person IDC. As my highly conservative dad says, I don't care what set of parts people choose to diddle, as long as it's not kids and consensual. Have fun. Queer person here, can't agree more. I'd rather we just choose a word, like queer, for instance, and just kinda go with that instead of adding more letters. It isn't that there are new sexualities and genders, but rather we have a more rich language to express who we are and how we feel. Agree completely. Liberal here. I very much support the Second Amendment. Me too. I'm pretty far left but differ with most people on my side because I support 2A rights. I'm always a bit shocked when people call the government fascist and racist, and then they want said fascist racists to be the only ones with high-powered guns. There's this weird thing in American politics where both sides have this weird motto of just wait until we're in power again. You're gonna see some serious shit, and in every case, some serious shit means ducked up attempts to curtail civil liberties, but only the ones my base already doesn't care about. I think of Beto and his yes, we are coming for your ARs and AKs message. Hey, dude, you know a sizable portion of your base probably owns and enjoys shooting these firearms responsibly, right? Our entire military infrastructure is built on the assumption that the American people want it to continue existing. Our internal supply chain is vulnerable to an insurgency. ISIS has spoofed GPS signals to capture drones. What do you think pissed off American engineers could do? No number of ARs out AKs is gonna mean squat against the military-industrial complex. Vietnam might disagree. Most liberals support the Second Amendment. They just disagree with conservatives on the spectrum of what kinds of regulations violate or don't violate it: owning nukes, owning full auto guns, buying private party without a background check, high capacity mags or just low capacity explosive weapons and rocket launchers sold retail. Yep, exactly this. My dad died recently and I opted to take his guns into my possession as my mom doesn't shoot and my brother, who sometimes lives with them, isn't the most stable person. My so asked me about registering the guns and if we needed special paperwork to legally take them into possession or transfer ownership from my dad to myself. He was gobsmacked when I told him I didn't need to do anything and that in my state it was in fact illegal for the state gov to keep such records. I told him that we will be taking a gun safety course since he didn't grow up with guns, and when I brought them home, I went over each firearm and showed him how to check to make sure the gun was unloaded, how to check and clear each gun, how to store them safely, and what the safety mechanisms on each looked like. I know a lot of responsible gun owners, but I also know a lot of gun owners who wouldn't bother with any of the above. I have zero issue with registering my guns and would have no issue with taking a mandatory gun safety course in order to have them. No one complains that needing insurance or needing to complete training and testing and obtaining a license to operate a car is infringing on their rights. We should be requiring at least that for gun ownership. Conservative. Weed should be legal, and even though I'm not a fan of abortions, I 100% support bodily autonomy for women. Not my body, not my choice. Edit. Also, very pro-LGBT. Honest question. What makes you a conservative then? Sounds like a libertarian to me. I'm libertarian, but I see management of the environment as a valid use of government authority. As a fellow libertarian, I see schooling as a necessary evil that the government is responsible for. I will kindly and politely object to the use of the words necessary evil being used to describe education. Government in general, yes. Education, no. Schooling is a necessity, but it is a public good. Yep, anything that individual would be hard pressed to do. Infrastructure, education, environment. Pro-choice conservative here. I don't like it, but it's not my place to say others can't do it. Pro-choice liberal here. I don't like it either, but it's not my place to say what someone else does with their body. Much respect to you. I'm pretty convinced a huge portion of pro-lifers feel this way. If I had a nickel for every time I heard I'm pro-life for myself but I don't believe the government should make that decision, I'd be able to fund Planned Parenthood in perpetuity. I'm willing to respect and call people whatever pronouns they want, but I really do not get this whole gender non-binary thing. You know how artists may have 1000s of words for colors that you and I don't care about? It's like that but for genders studies majors. If gender is a social construct then there can be more than two, and people who spend way more time thinking about gender than you and I do may decide something outside the two fits them, and if their community accepts that, then a new gender has been formed. Since gender is a social construct, the odds that you or I will ever come across someone who wishes to be called Z or Zir is small, but should that arise you and I are both prepared to not be dickheads about it, and that's all that matters, from our side. Ty for responding and giving me another perspective. I think I got caught up on the idea of, well, if gender roles and constructs don't matter, why can't you just be a guy who is into typically female things and vice versa, but it seems like this is more about how a person feels internally. Why can't you just be a guy who is into typically female things and vice versa? That is personally how I feel. I don't see myself as a typical male in my gender role in society. I do many things that would have been considered a female role when I was growing up, but it makes me feel like I'm expanding the definition of male. Not that I need to find a new word, but that's just me. Trans woman here. I'm pretty firmly binary, but a lot of my friend group isn't, so I can offer some insight. Non-binary identities threw me off for the longest time. It didn't make sense. There are guys and there are girls. What else could there be? However, having crossed that line myself, I can tell you that there's a lot more gray area than people realize. It's important to understand that gender, like many things, is social. It's built up on real, biological factors, but we extrapolated it to mean a lot of things biology doesn't. Clothes, patterns of speech, what you do for fun and for a living. A lot of these have gendered influences that don't make much sense when you start to take them apart. The thing is, nobody perfectly adheres to these hypothetical gender norms. You've probably already thought of a few ways you don't do manly or girly things, like many stereotypes. They aren't perfectly true for anyone, and that's where non-binary gender identity comes in. Some people are born and raised one gender, but find they don't care much for the baggage that comes with it. Then, as they begin to explore the other gender, they find that one isn't quite right either. They don't come close to fitting either stereotype, they are somewhere in the middle instead. Of course, this is a broad oversimplification, and isn't true for everyone, but that's okay. The result is the same. Non-binary people deserve respect, just like everyone else. And at the end of the day, is using a different pronoun truly a huge thing to ask? So, you're pretty much saying that everyone is an individual. Everyone is composed of some combination of masculine, feminine, and youthful traits. Do we really need to make up categories, names, pronouns for each permutation? Nobody is purely masculine or feminine. And here's where it gets complicated. In many ways, gender is arbitrary. Sex, however, isn't. There are very real biological differences between the sexes, though scientifically speaking, those exist on a spectrum too. And while a lot of the rules of gender have no basis in them, that doesn't mean treating everyone exactly the same is a great idea. Likewise, many people like aspects of their gender. As a trans woman, I very much enjoy some of the girly things I've picked up over time, even though a lot of them get blown out of proportion or go weird places. Why are there different razors? Why can't I have pockets anymore? Why? Society. Why? Ultimately, I think the concept of gender is going to get a lot less binary in the coming years. I doubt it'll go away altogether. Just like I doubt it'll stop being associated with what's in your pants. But I think we're on the path to accepting that not everyone should live their life defined by one of two broad, ill-defined, and mostly arbitrary categories. TL, DR, a la carte genders are the future. Liberal. Too many things are funded by taxpayers. We need to cut back on some different areas. There is way too much inefficiency in many public offices. What do you want to give to the private sector? They haven't exactly created a great prison system or healthcare system in the US. There are currently power outages in California thanks to PG&E while SMUD, public sector, keeps the power on for Sacramento. Reckless investing from banks causes a recession every decade or two. Comcast and AT&T aren't exactly beloved internet providers and more cities are trying to establish local options. The private sector is all about making money, which works fine for Apple or Microsoft, but it shouldn't apply to any kind of public care. I'm a liberal and I don't think cultural appropriation is really a thing. At least not in the way we commonly talk about it, which boils down to you can only participate in X culture if you have X skin color or else it's racist. The idea of completely abolishing prisons just doesn't work. There will always be pieces that need to be taken off the board. We absolutely need to tear down the entire prison police system and build something better from the ground up, but completely eliminating it is a pipe dream. We can start by making for-profit prisons illegal. Conservative, but very much more libertarian. Let people get abortions, though I can see both sides of that argument, and decriminalize all drugs. We should have nationwide healthcare, but more of a bare minimum baseline kind of thing. I'm pretty much an anarchist at heart, but my brain doesn't see how that would work for any social group too large for everyone to know everyone else, and so I'm fine with the idea of government in general. Progressive liberal. Trans people should compete in athletic competitions in the gender they were born as, not how they identify. Conservative. I couldn't care less about how you duck yourself up with substance abuse, sexual habits or cosmetic surgeries, but you gotta deal with that shit on your own if you do it. Except people don't deal with it on their own when they seriously harm themselves. They end up receiving emergency care and other life-saving services at the expense of everyone else because we're too humane to just let somebody suffer and die. I haven't done the math, but I'm willing to bet that the cost of policing and incarcerating people for these minor crimes is more than the cost to help them medically. Huge Bernie supporter. For me it's immigration probably. I hate how the entire debate has become about feelings. I wouldn't sneak into the UK and expect them to take care of me, but say that about illegal immigrants from Latin America and everyone hates you. I hate that if you're against illegal immigration somehow you're against all immigration. Like either you have to be for open borders, or a racist. No reasonable middle ground. Like, let's figure out how many people a country can assimilate, and allow that many people in. Conservative. Pro-choice. The idea that the common people have the right to arm themselves is about as liberal as you can get in the classic sense of liberalism. It confuses me that the modern left stands in such staunch opposition to this great leveler. What is even more astonishing when you think about it is that, by supporting this right, the Democrats could quite possibly gain enough voters to make them a dominant majority and might well be able to control all three branches of American government for the foreseeable future. I know many people who would prefer to vote Democrat but can't get past their hostility to the Second Amendment. Likely, that makes you sound very unsure about it, when in fact there is absolutely no doubt about it. Liberal, progressive, socialist, whatever. I think artists, cake shops, stores etc. should be allowed to discriminate, so long as they aren't providing a vitally necessary service, medical care, supplies, food, a few others. I don't support the discrimination, but I'm not comfortable with the government telling people that they are required to provide a service to someone unless the government is paying them directly. Businesses that receive government contracts shouldn't be allowed to discriminate, since the government shouldn't support it. This also applies to any tax-exempt organizations since they're essentially receiving all the taxes they would otherwise pay, and the business should be allowed to say no to the government and still operate privately. If they're in a business that could realistically get government contracts. As a LGBT person myself, I wouldn't want to give money to a homophobic ass for my wedding cake anyway. Liberal, pro-gun rights. Also, while being pro-choice, I also feel that fathers shouldn't be on the hook for child support. If the mother can choose to not have the child, the father should be able to also choose to not be responsible. Liberal, progressive here. I oppose certain forms of gun control. Yes, I believe in universal background checks and even better, licensing. But if someone does pass all the necessary background checks and barriers, they should be able to purchase and own whatever kind of gun they want, even high-powered rifles. The idea of living in a world where only authority figures are permitted to own effective weapons is against the spirit of the Second Amendment, and is a bit frightening. I'm very liberal, but I do think there needs to be a solution for the flood of people at the southern border. Not a big stupid wall, but something. I don't know what. I'm not an immigration expert. Communist here. I think we should not abolish golf. I support kill shelters. It sucks, and it feels bad, but some animals just can't get homed. Just kill them humanely, end their misery, and educate people. Having a full shelter while more animals run loose, damaging the environment, killing local fauna, and occasionally posing a hazard to regular folks like you and me, that's not an elegant or fair solution either. Lib. Affirmative action is just another form of discrimination. It turns out racial discrimination is racial discrimination. It's frustrating the number of people who seem to think that injecting from a position of power into the definition of racism gives them the green light to be openly racist by the correct definition. Liberal here. I like guns. I think abortion is shitty. There are male